Welcome to Free Thought Matters. I'm Annie Laurie Gaylor, co-founder and co-president of the Freedom from Religion Foundation.
I'm Andrew Seidel, an attorney and the director of strategic response here at FFRF. FFRF is a state church watchdog working hard to keep religion out of government. We also serve as the nation's largest association of freethinkers, mainly atheists and agnostics, with about 30,000 members nationwide.
And we'd love to have you join us at ffrf.org, or you can ask for a free copy of our newspaper, Free Thought Today.
Today, we are delighted to introduce an esteemed guest, U.S. Representative Mark Pocan, who has represented Wisconsin's 2nd District, our district right here in Madison, Wisconsin, since 2013. Representative Pocan was named a champion of the First Amendment at FFRF's recent national convention because he's one of 12 members of the Congressional Freethought Caucus.
So we're delighted to have you here today. Thank you.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
Thank you especially for being a member of the Congressional Freethought Caucus.
I'm glad we finally have one.
Me too. It was
Yeah.
really exciting. Our members were so thrilled when this was announced. It was really a kind of a nice rallying cry for them.
So for someone who doesn't know what a Freethought Caucus is
Sure.
in Congress, can you tell us more about it and why you are a part of it?
Yeah, I'll take it a step. A caucus in general is just for people who have similar interests or values, and it's also a way to help disseminate information. So if there's legislation introduced, to make sure people are aware of it, could be affecting that issue. Specifically for the Freethought Caucus, its members who think there is a separation between church and state, which everyone should think, but at least a dozen of us join the caucus to say such. And then also if there's legislation that's introduced, either that's good or bad, we can help share information about that so that we can be aware of it and try to have that so that if something is moving, again, we can try to stop something or try to help get more sponsors for something. And it's just a very good way to connect members who are working on certain issues.
So even before you were a member of the Freethought Caucus, we were working with you.
Mm-hmm.
One of your constituents, Dan Barker, who's co-president with me, he's on the road today. But do you want to talk a little bit about what transpired when Dan, who is a former minister, came to you and asked that he wanted to give a secular invocation before Congress?
Yeah, so this has been an issue. I've been in local government, state and federal for like 25 years, right? And so I've followed it for a long time. And in Congress and most government bodies, they start with some kind of an invocation. And often it is a Catholic priest, a Jewish rabbi, it's somebody, but it's always religious based, which already seems a little bit interesting given that we have a separation of church and state, that we even have such a thing, but we do. And we wanted to make sure that it was fully inclusive of everyone who's asking. And since we know that at least 20% of the folks are not religious, or that we wanted to make sure everyone was included. And Dan would be the perfect person to deliver an invocation, and we made a formal request as a member of Congress that we'd like him to be able to do that. The person who is the church or the congressional chaplain refused that. We wound up going into a lawsuit over that, and at the end of the day, we were not successful. But that also hasn't stopped us, because now we've put another request in. This time Jared Huffman and I have made another request trying to address specifically the concerns that were brought up in the lawsuit that they said we couldn't have it last time. We're trying again. We've met with the House chaplain, been given lots of different reasons. We're waiting for the final reason that they're going to try to deny us. But then we're going to pursue it as far as we need to, because it's important that we can have every voice be a part of this if we're going to have an invocation.
Well, we're very grateful to you for constituency services to your constituent, Dan Barker.
Absolutely.
And also, you did a front of the court brief for us.
Yeah.
And there was an interesting statistic in that about the number of Dane County residents. We're here in Dane County. 2/3 of your constituents are Dane County.
Mm-hmm.
And do you remember what that statistic is? How many?
It was over 50%.
Yeah.
Help me out.
It's just over 50%
Okay,
are
right.
not religious.
Yeah.
Which was, that's really striking. And it goes to show this kind of the central problem that we had with this. This is one of the few areas where discrimination is still allowed against a huge class of people. And it's because we have chaplains in Congress. We spend $800,000 a year on those chaplains, and then 40% of the prayers are delivered by guest chaplains, but not if you don't believe in God and won't say that from the congressional pulpit.
Yeah, we've had interesting debates over this too, I have to tell you. So even when we tried to get Dan in, Dan is ordained.
Yes.
That was the first reason we were told why he couldn't be there. And then when we hit that, then they had another reason. Most recently, we were told informally, as we're presenting now our second person that we're trying to get to be able to provide the invocation, that you had to pray to a higher power. And I said, well, if someone wants to pray to Mother Earth as a higher power, would that be acceptable? And then you could see the wheels churning, how they're going to turn that answer down. So, it just doesn't make a lot of sense that this is being a fight that's being put up by the chaplain, because we should try to be inclusive of everyone in the country if we're going to have this practice of having an invocation. And given that, I think, it's something that we're going to continue to pursue. And now, hopefully, by having a caucus, we've got more support to pursue it.
More power, and finally some representation for the 24% of us in the United States, adults who are not religious. And of course, a lot of the younger people, even more of them, are not religious these days, up to a third. So that's a lot of people to exclude. And
and the striking thing, real quick, about the higher power thing is that we've seen invocations that haven't invoked a higher power. It happens kind of regularly in Congress.
Well, actually, as we were given various reasons why we couldn't, we found the case where they did just what they said, why they couldn't on multiple occasions. So at least a consistent policy, because right now it is discrimination against anyone who's not religious, purely for that reason. And again, as a member of Congress, if we're offering up our constituents, someone's willing to fly all the way out to Washington and do this, that is something that should be recognized rather than a chaplain making that decision individually, which is, I believe, what's really happening.
Let me ask you
Father
real quick.
Patrick Conroy, who's a Roman Catholic priest, is the chaplain.
Correct. Well, I was just going to ask, how many people actually sit through, how many legislators, Congress representatives or senators, maybe, I guess you don't know Senate, how many actually sit through the prayers, do you know?
Well, so it's done at the opening of the session, but that's not when you're there. Unless you're there to deliver a 1 minute or a 5 minute speech that we often start sessions, no one's in the room. So it's pretty much in an empty room, which already probably sets itself up for a few jokes. And
an empty gesture or something.
Right. It's just, and that's why to have this, ongoing fight. And to be fair, I play cards sometimes with the chaplain, so he's a nice enough person. It's just I wish he would follow the law. And
This is not a personal fight.
No,
this
not
is
at
over
all.
principle.
It's over principle, and we would just like a consistent principle applied to everyone. And I think we're eventually going to win on this issue. It's just, unfortunately, we've had to take it to the point of going to lawsuits.
So it also affects people like Buddhists, for example, who may not have ordained ministers, Quakers. So it's not just non-believers and humanists who don't qualify.
Well, and again, as the reasoning got convoluted in order to try to justify why Dan couldn't come, we wound up probably excluding more people that have come before, because as you started coming up with a reason why, you started realizing the exceptions you've already had. And again, now we're going to have exceptions to the rule.
Exactly.
It's all so inconsistent. And again, I do feel that we will get this to the point someday that it'll make more sense. I don't know if we'll ever get rid of the invocation, but I think
that would be the most consistent policy, right?
That would,
Just
but think
don't
of
have
those 6 people that watch that are going to miss it in
Yes,
Congress.
this is a very
So-
expensive way to solemnize Congress. If nobody's there, $800,000 a year per chaplain, is that right?
No, that's the total
Or
cost
total.
for the
Expense
chaplain's
for the
office.
Yeah.
office,
So
It is just, there are a lot of, kind of old processes that exist still that probably at one point you could maybe argue was justified, but at current times, I think probably is worth revisiting, and this could be one of those.
So there's another symbolic issue in Congress, and we talked a little bit about this with Representative Huffman, but the House had at least tried to drop the mandatory religious oath for witnesses who are sworn in. So have you followed that?
Dropping the "So help me
So
God"
help me
language
God,
from the end of the oath.
Yeah, not real closely, because the rules have changed under Republicans and Democrats what you had to do, and I don't know if we're currently, I think we've changed even the rules one more time. For a while, the Republicans wanted to make everyone have to swear in order to give any testimony, and in some committees it was outright ridiculous, but then again, some of the committee chairs, I would argue, were outright ridiculous who were requiring it, so it became kind of a personal preference, I guess.
So we are going to take a break, and when we come back, we want to ask you, Representative Pocan, about a rather harrowing incident that propelled you into your personal political activism. We'll be right back with Free Thought Matters.
Hi, I'm Ron Reagan, an unabashed atheist, and I'm alarmed by the intrusions of religion into our secular government. That's why I'm asking you to support the Freedom from Religion Foundation, the nation's largest and most effective association of atheists and agnostics, working to keep state and church separate, just like our founding fathers intended. Please support the Freedom from Religion Foundation. Ron Reagan, lifelong atheist, not afraid of burning in hell.
My name is Ryan Jane, and I'm an atheist because the vast and fascinating world that we find ourselves living in is cheapened by the idea of a man like God. And I'm an atheist because the rich and precious experience of being a human alive on earth is cheapened by empty promises of an eternal afterlife. We live in a time when, more than ever, we need to be encouraging objective thinking and seeking objective thinkers who will come up with real solutions to problems in the real world. I think it's disturbing that, nevertheless, atheism continues to be viewed by many as a dirty word. I want my daughter to grow up in a world where it's okay to say, I accept reality as it is, for better or worse, and I don't believe in man-made myths and monsters. That's why I'm an out-of-the-closet atheist.
Thank you for watching Free Thought Matters. You can find more content by the Freedom from Religion Foundation at our website, ffrf.org. Follow FFRF on Facebook, and you'll get notifications about all of our content, including whenever we go live on FFRF's Ask an Atheist. FFRF is also on YouTube, where all of our programs, including this show and our weekly news bites, are available to watch anytime. Thanks again for watching, and we'll see you on the web.
I'm Annie Laurie Gaylor with Free Thought Matters.
I'm Andrew Seidel, and we are talking with Representative Mark Pocan, a member of the Freethought Caucus and a defender of secular government. Now, Representative Pocan, before we get into kind of some of these other issues that we want to talk about, we were wondering if you might share with us the story of what really launched you into getting politically active, because it's kind of a harrowing tale.
Sure. Well, I guess, to be fair, politically active, my dad was on the city council and I had worked on campaigns, but I think to get me active in the Dane County community and especially with some of the LGBT organizations. So I think I just opened my business at 23, so it was within a year or so of opening up the business, but I had been leaving what would be a gay bar in Madison, and as I left, I was followed by two people with a baseball bat and then beaten with a baseball bat, called a faggot, and kind of woke up bloodied, needed some stitches, had to go to the hospital. And I think I realized at that point that, maybe I wasn't yet publicly out with who I was, because it was still pretty hard going back now almost 30 years when this happened, or actually over 30 years. But it really propelled me to say, well, look, this shouldn't happen to anyone. So that's when I joined the boards of several of the LGBT organizations in the community, got me more active with the local government, which is then when I eventually ran for the Dane County Board of Supervisors. So it really was, just one of those things, again, no one should simply for who they love be treated that way. As you know, all too often religion is given as the reason for people's hatred, which seems counterintuitive to supposedly what they're supposed to be following. Instead, it's the reaction that some people have, and
putting religion over people,
exactly.
And being told religion telling them people are bad, and then thinking they have to hate.
Right, and it used to be really tough for people. Like, people were fired.
Oh, yes.
I mean, everything. We've been fortunate in Wisconsin, as you know, we were the first state in the nation to have a gay and lesbian civil rights bill.
David Clarenbach in the Wisconsin legislature.
1983, signed by a Republican governor, when Republicans didn't weaponize this issue yet. And it took 9 more years for another state to do that.
Wow.
But I was actually, I think, a freshman in college when that happened, because I remember getting nomination papers, or not nomination papers, but a petition signed in my local community where I grew up in Kenosha, Wisconsin. And I remember the state senator was a very conservative state senator. We had, actually, she might have been a state rep at the time from Kenosha, called my parents and said, "Do you know what your son is doing?" And, and he was a Democrat, too. So go figure.
So then you got into the Wisconsin legislature.
Yeah, first I started the Dane County Board of Supervisors, where I served 3 terms, a half term and 2 other terms. I came in a special election. Then I went to the Wisconsin legislature for 14 years and served, and then went to Congress.
And then, of course, it was very fitting that you replaced Tammy Baldwin in the U.S. House because she was the first out lesbian, both in the Wisconsin legislature and in Congress. So very, very appropriate.
Yeah, and I served with Tammy on the county board, and I helped her get elected to the state legislature. When she ran for Congress, I ran for the state legislature, her seat, and then when she ran for the Senate, I ran for Congress. So we've kind of had this very close working relationship for a long, long time.
Well, and one of the things I find really striking about this, your whole kind of arc here, is it started with these people who were trying to do kind of the opposite. They were trying to intimidate you and make you feel like
If not
shame.
kill you.
Yeah, I mean, possibly even that. And instead, now you are representing this in the U.S. Congress. I mean, that's amazing.
Yeah, no, and it is interesting. I think that happens often, when someone's got an extreme position, but they think it's a mainstream position for whatever reason. They wound up having me do now. I think I could do far more effective against what they cared about at the time. But even recently, we had a crackpot who decided and somehow found personal emails and things to send stuff that decided that didn't really happen. And it was after the Justin, or what was his name, the guy in Chicago who got beat and who did fake it.
Oh, yeah.
This person tried to insinuate that I must have done that. They live way out of state. Crackpot, Capitol Police had to go after. We still have a lot of crazy situations, even though when I was on the county board, I remember one time someone sent an article when I was running and put dead faggot across your face.
Wow.
And much of that has gone through the years, but we just recently that's resurfaced. Or, when you look at fights that we've had in various state legislatures, or just a couple weeks ago, there was a child, I believe it was a teenager in Tennessee, but it was a southern state, who had sent some messages to another male classmate, and someone posted them publicly, and he committed suicide.
That's right.
So there's still a lot of those things that happen, and all too often, you're finding this based on people's what I would call misinterpretation of religion. They're using religion as a reason to do these things, and it seems, again, from at least what I think they're trying to present, counter to what they're actually claiming. And I think that's an interesting dichotomy that they've got.
So we have this we were the model state for civil rights, gay civil rights in Wisconsin, LGBTQ. But in Congress, what's going on? We have the Equality Act that was just passed by the House or this summer, a great victory, but it's just sitting there in the Senate. And I wondered if you could talk about the Equality Act and what it is and why it's so vital that it get passed.
Yeah, so the fact that we have marriage equality, I mean, first of all, I think happened pretty fast, right? All of a sudden, it had been a long languishing period, and then in a very small amount of time, not only did it pass with the court decision, but also popular public opinion is there. I mean,
Which I would argue those were pretty tied together.
They were, yes. No, absolutely. In fact, I think that had a big part of the influencing the courts to do the right thing.
You think the Supreme Court got the idea?
Yeah, I think sometimes they might be a little more political than they indicate. But,
I would agree 100%.
But this was significant because now you can get married anywhere in the country. And my husband and I were married in Canada because we couldn't be in Wisconsin at the time. So we went up to Toronto, and it was kind of funny. We went to the what they called the chapel in the city hall is where we got married. And they said that they liked having us there because usually when people go there, they have to get married. We saw several couples with a pregnant wife and other things. And we were actually kind of happy to be there. And so that was kind of interesting situation. But the problem is in 29 states in this country, you can still be legally married on a Saturday, post your pictures on Facebook on a Sunday, and get fired or lose your housing legally on a Monday, simply for who you love. And the Equality Act, through the civil rights law, would largely take care of everything that marriage equality didn't take care of across the spectrum. And that's why it's so important to have done. It passed the House in a bipartisan fashion with a few Republican votes. And we're hoping that, with the Senate, we can still try to get it done. If not, we'll change some of the Senate till we can get it done.
So this is basically amending the 1964 Civil Rights Act, which talks about not discriminating against people based on race, color, ethnic, sex, religion.
Yeah.
But it doesn't incorporate LGBTQ, sexual preference, sexual orientation.
Right.
So it's legal to discriminate in over half the states.
Yeah, about 29 states, still have that.
So it could be employment, it could be
housing.
housing.
a number of other areas, and then there's also the so-called religious liberty laws that allow you to discriminate because, God forbid you'd want to sell me a cake.
Well, and
that would be an issue.
That's the striking thing for me. I mean, it takes a lot of the power away from the Religious Freedom Restoration Act, and it says your religious beliefs are not a license to discriminate, which is, they've been really working hard to weaponize religious liberty. And taking that away, I think, is a really powerful argument for our side.
Yeah, and we should realize that, don't forget, people like Mike Pence were really big in this. In fact, I would argue this may be the reason why Mike Pence couldn't run for president. If you remember that when he wanted to run when they had a bunch of candidates, much like we have right now, he was the first one not to kind of major candidate, not to be able to get into the race. And it was because of some, I think, issues around this issue in his state and how it applied. So maybe that was a good thing, but then again, now he's vice president, so I'm not sure. But we do need to address, those issues to make sure that people aren't discriminated against. You shouldn't be able to find a reason, no matter how weak it may be. And then don't forget, we had the county clerk in, was it Kentucky or somewhere?
It was Kentucky, yeah.
Somewhere identification. That's all I remember. And she was just breaking the law on her own, again, for what she said was religious reasons. And again, that's not enough reason to be able to discriminate.
That's right. If you're religious, you still have to follow the law, and you still have to honor other people's rights.
Yeah, I'd always remember that love thy neighbor part first, maybe, if they're really reading it, that would be a good one.
So I think we have time to show something. It's a clip of you going tete-a-tete with Secretary of Education Betsy DeVos.
Sure.
So we want to briefly talk about the attacks against public education, but let's take a look at that.
Was that a yes or is that a no? I'm trying to get a yes or no, I guess, on that.
We follow the law as this.
So personally, you don't have an opinion on it?
Defined, and
because you are giving money, so it leads me to the next question. You are giving money to some charter schools that do discriminate, and that report, I'd like to follow up from our chairwoman's question, where $1 billion has been wasted with 1,000 schools going to charter schools. 1 out of every 4 have failed, and I know in your testimony you thought we should have more charter schools. But when you have a 25% failure rate, that'd be like saying if one of your car tires keeps going flat, rather than replacing it, you're going to add more tires to a car. I don't know if that makes a lot of sense.
So you're a fierce defender of public education. I love that. That exchange went viral. I remember it when it went viral on Twitter. It was great to see. Can you tell us about why public education is so important to you?
Well, I mean, it's the great equalizer, right? No matter who you are, rich or poor, you should be able to get a public education. My goal, reason I run for office, is I want everyone's families to have equal opportunities across the board. Shouldn't matter if you're rich or not. And Betsy DeVos, who is very, 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 very rich, has made a career out of trying to take away public education opportunities in favor of religious school opportunities. And by putting funding into those schools, often they're terrible schools. 1 out of 4 fail. But it's done for all the wrong reasons. So, we have to fight if you really believe in income inequality and equality, and you want every family to succeed no matter what zip code they live in or where they come from demographically. You have to support public schools. And again, she's made a career just the opposite. So, of course, Donald Trump made her the education secretary.
Yeah.
Another fox guarding the chicken coop.
Yeah. Luckily, she's so incompetent that she hasn't been able to do a lot in the line that she's wanted to. So we've been able to push back pretty effectively. But it's not that she hasn't tried. It's just that she hasn't had the skills as maybe some other secretaries in getting their agendas done. So, but it means all the more we have to be vigilant, because if we lose public schools, you will really lose, probably the most important thing to keep everyone equal.
And you're touching on something, too, that I think kind of gets lost in the conversation sometimes, which is a lot of the school choice advocates like DeVos, their goal is not really just to privatize education. It's also to erode that public education system and to make it so bad that kids are forced into religious schools instead.
Exactly. So when you take money out of the public school system to put to charter schools, one, you can do what I was talking about, schools that discriminate against people, and many of the religious schools discriminate against gay and lesbian students and others. Two, they often don't have programs for students with disabilities, so they're discriminated against when they're doing all this. But that takes it directly out of the public schools. So when you do that, you put more pressure on the public schools, and then the public schools that are educating students with disabilities and others then have those tensions because they have fewer dollars. So
it
really
becomes a dumping ground, and I mean that in the best way, for all of the more expensive and students who need more individualized care, and then how can the school that's been defunded do it?
Right, exactly, because the funding, it's not like you're keeping public funding equal and then adding funds for this. You're taking it directly out of the public schools. And for some people, they just want to profitize it. For someone like Betsy DeVos, she has a different agenda. She wants money to go to religious schools that discriminate. But again, my oath is to the Constitution. We supposedly have a separation of church and state, and we shouldn't be putting money into programs like that. So it's not just me. Luckily, a lot of people join me in having those fights, but especially with the Wisconsin experience, where we've seen it very close.
That's what I was gonna say.
And up front, and seen some of the biggest failures, we can go nationally. In fact, Mike Pence came before the committee when he was a governor, and I got a chance to talk to him because it was right after the numbers in Wisconsin showed that a good chunk of students in charter schools and the new expansion already went to those schools. So it was really a tax program, a write-off for rich people,
Right.
rather than, and people who chose to send their kids to religious schools, rather than being
Kids
anything.
who've been denied it in the first place.
Exactly, and then same thing happened in Indiana.
And of course, unfortunately, we had the oldest voucher program forced on the Milwaukee schools, which have really been a disaster. So it's so important for the Freethought Caucus to be there to fight things like vouchers in schools, and for you to be a part of it, and we're very grateful to you for that.
Yeah, well, thank you. And, I like to often talk about the Milwaukee program in Congress because when we first started, don't forget, we were giving money to people for schools where the head of the school said he could read a book by placing his hand on it. Or they would spend it to buy Cadillacs, which is not an educational expense. And so we've gone through the full problem set that comes with doing money like this to private schools.
Well, thank you again, Mark, for joining us today. We really appreciate it.
And thank you for joining us on Free Thought Matters.
Because free thought matters.
Hi, I'm Steve Pinker. In my book, Enlightenment Now, I show that the world has become a better place as reason has been overcoming superstition and tribalism. But the values of the Enlightenment are under attack. That's why I'm a proud member of the Freedom from Religion Foundation, the nation's largest association of freethinkers working to keep state and church separate. Please join me in supporting the Freedom from Religion Foundation to ensure that our government is driven not by religion, but by reason.